Okay, now we're going to complete the square. This is lesson 3.5.1 continued. First of all, I'm going to show you step by step how to complete the square. So this problem is going to take a little bit longer, and then we'll work out a few more problems. All right, the very first step one is to create the space. You have to have everything in the right order and make a little space to complete the square. So when we complete the square, we have things like x squared plus 6x, and then we try to figure out what goes right here. I actually like to put a square, and it reminds me that we're completing the square. And then I just scoot that equal sign 7 over, and that just is the setup. You always want your x squared term and your x term. And x squared needs to be all by itself. And then anything else, any other number, you move over to the other side. So that's step one, create some space. Step two, we get to do what we last lesson, which was figure out what that C value is to complete the square. So that's why this lesson or this method is called completing the square. So in that little box right there, you figure out what would be there. Well, we take 6 and we cut it in half, which is 3. And then we square it, which is 9. So we're going to put plus 9. However, this is an equal sign. And when we add something to one side, we have to make sure we also add it to both sides. So step 3 is add C to both sides. So these two steps kind of go together. You're doing the completing the square by adding C to both sides. Now next, we're going to rewrite in factored form. So the whole purpose of completing the square is to get this side to be a perfect square trinomial so that I can rewrite it as x plus 3 squared. On the right-hand side, you're just going to do whatever addition is there. So we have 7 plus 9, well, that's 16. So we'll just write that down, and that's factored form. Then we're going to move on. And I don't know if this looks familiar to you, but in the previous lesson 3.4, we solved square root problems. So if there's something with a squared there, we can just go ahead and square root both sides. And when we square root something squared, they undo each other. And when we square root a number, when we're solving an equation, we get a plus or minus. So we're going to put plus or minus on both sides, or on the 4, sorry. And then we're just going to finish solving this. So the last step to solving it is make sure you have 2 answers, usually, unless there's a 0 involved, but usually you're going to have 2 answers. We're going to subtract 3 from both sides very carefully because we have a positive 4 minus 3, which is 1. And that's one of my answers. And we also have negative 4 minus 3, which is negative 7. And these are my 2 answers. I could always go back up here and check my answer. So if I had a calculator or just in your head, you can do 1 plus 6 times 1 is 7. That's true. And you can put a negative 7 in there as well and get 49 minus plus negative 42, which is also 7. You can always check your answer on all these problems that we're doing. So let's try out a couple more examples. And if you need to go back through that one, listen to it again. I'm going to go a little bit faster as we solve these and not write out the words for every step, but I'm still going to be doing those actions. So step 1 is to create the space. Move things over if you need to. So this minus 15 is not where I want it. I want it on that side of the equal sign. So I'm going to add 15 to both sides and make a space right here and put the 15 over here. And I'll just put both of my boxes because we'll do that in a little bit. So x squared plus 14 on the left with a space equals 15 with a space. Now I can do step 2, which is figure out what goes in this box. Well, half of 14 is 7, and then I square it. So hopefully you figured that out. 49 goes in that box. Make sure you add it to both sides. That is a requirement. And the whole purpose of making that perfect square is to write it as a perfect square or squared binomial. So when you take this number and cut it in half, that half number is the number that goes in this spot. So positive 7, because the 14 was positive, and then 7 squared gives you the 49. So if we were to factor this, we would get x plus 7 times x plus 7. And on the other side, oh, happy day, we have 64, which is a nice number for our next step, which is taking the square root of both sides. So I take the square root of both sides, I get